Hello, and welcome to Workplace Stories, the podcast where human capital experts share their real-world experiences and insights. Hosted by Red Thread Research, Workplace Stories surfaces the latest industry trends, innovative talent strategies, and best practices for success. Tune in for practical advice on how to best transform your workplace.
Hey, welcome to Workplace Stories. My name is Danny Johnson, and today we had the opportunity to sit down with Lisa K. Solomon and Jeff Rogers. Lisa is a designer in residence at Stanford's D.school, and Jeff Rogers is a principal of Learning and Facilitation at Rethinking and a co-founder at Projectory. They also both are helping us design the summit experience this year. For those of you who attended last year, they were responsible for not just the design, but the facilitation when we were all in Sundance. There were a few things that stood out to me in this conversation. The first one was the idea that future thinking or thinking about the future is a leadership muscle, and most of us don't use it very much. There are so many pressures on us when we're thinking about quarterly results or annual plans that we think that foresight or thinking of the future is actually someone else's job. But Lisa and Jeff make the case that it's everybody's job and that we've just stopped practicing it. Second thing that really stood out to me is that every organization is running against an assumed future that no one actually questions. Jeff called it the official future. It's kind of the unspoken set of bets that your strategy is built on. And in a stable world, that works really well. But in this one, those unexamined assumptions are exactly where an organization can get blindsided. The third thing that really stood out to me is Lisa had a discussion about how design isn't about blueprints. It's actually not about controlling the outcome at all. It's about creating conditions for new ideas to emerge. And it sounds really simple, but almost nobody is actually doing it. And it's been really interesting to walk through the design process with both Lisa and Jeff, because that's the mindset that they're using to make sure that we get Summit right. I want to close out the TLDR quoting Jeff, who is actually quoting Hazel Henderson, a futurist, who said, "We don't know enough to be pessimistic," which is a really enlightened way to look at the future. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. Lisa and Jeff are both super sharp thinkers, and it was a genuinely fun conversation. If you work in L&D or HR, or you are trying to think about what your organization ahead, this one's definitely worth your time. Give it a listen.
Welcome, Lisa and Jeff, to Workplace Stories.
We're so excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you.
Yeah, welcome back.
Welcome back. That's exactly where I was going to go. So a year ago, we had you all on the podcast in anticipation of Elevate, now rebranded to Summit. And we are here to kind of talk a bit about what's changed and what we're looking forward to for this next event that we're going to get to do together. So when we were talking last year, it felt like in many ways that really kind of the future was happening to us, right? And one of the things we reframed to Elevate was not really about things happening to us, but how do we see and design the futures that we would like to create? So as we look to where we are right now, how do you think about this question, which is, who gets to control the narrative about the future and work? And how can HR leadership own that narrative? And Lisa, I want to go to you for that.
Super softball right off the bat. Love it. Stacia, like I anticipate nothing
I asked her to do that.
Let's just get right. Yeah. Belly of the beast. There's a lot to unpack in what that seemingly simple open question. I mean, one is, what's HR's role in shaping the future, which is a big part of it? Are they reactive? Are they being proactive? And I think last year at Elevate, it was very much about just naming the reality of that moment, which seems almost quaint one year ago, that the future was changing, primarily because of the great research that you do. We can put some form around it. We can talk about it in more concrete ways when we talk about what's happening with AI, putting pressure on organizations, really asking questions about what is the role of humans in a world where everything seems to be augmented, not to mention what's going on in our geopolitical landscape, of which organizations even have little control over. So there was a lot of questions that we just wanted to surface using your great research, while also building the capabilities of the participants to think like futurists, to be more equipped to anticipate, first of all, what's unfolding and why, learning from each other while learning with you, and two, flexing their imagination about how the world might change, and at the very least, rehearsing different futures so that they could be better prepared to be in a proactive, as you say, coming back to part two of your question, narrative shaping role. So they weren't always in a receiving stance. I think looking at Summit this year, that's more true than ever. I think hopefully, and maybe we can get a chance to actually talk to participants who are attending again this year, we could actually say, how did that scenario work help prepare you for the escalating emergence of new AI models and how those AI models are actually being integrated or not, having real honest conversations about that to, again, land at the question that I think you're at the heart of, which is what is the role of HR and how do narratives help shape that future?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to augment that. Danny and I have started to have conversations with folks in advance of this year's event. And when we've talked about what people will take away from it, I've been dividing it really into three things. One being an experience, an opportunity to step back and envision that future is going to be, what that narrative is that we're going to help with. Second, a set of tools and skills and the practice of using them in the event like we did last year so that people can literally take that and back home and run those run those experiences themselves. And then third, a community of other folks who are thinking about it. And I very explicitly didn't say like-minded folks, because one of the beautiful things is the discussion and the different perspectives from people who are there. But it's really about having folks who are generous and thoughtful and want to lean into this future of where it's going. So I'm so excited for us to come back and talk about what's different and how we have been able to shape the future and how we're going to continue to shape the future.
Can I hop in with something on this
Please.
as well, real quick? Just, you also asked what we thought maybe had changed. And I actually think this more nuanced conversation about the narrative, that there is a narrative about the future of work. There is a narrative about what's happening with big AI right now, and just people recognizing that is a story. And the extension of that is all of our ideas about the future. Those are all stories as well. We don't have a lot of data about what's happening in 2030, right? All of our data is about the past. All or many of our biggest decisions are about the future. And we're going into them with kind of a set of contested narratives. And it's great to recognize and dig in a little bit to, where do these things come from? Who has shaped them? What are they drawing on? What are already kind of the terms that have been set? Who set them? Is HR more on the back foot, working in someone else's kind of narrative universe? Or is there an opportunity to actually subvert some of that or flip it, offer a different angle, a different perspective? And wherever there's a narrative, there's also the possibility for a counter narrative. And I think it's really important to have those and to actually, be able to hold two narratives in mind at the same time and kind of let them be in conversation with each other rather than having one drown out all of the others as a master narrative.
Yeah. And we saw that happen live with this whole Citriani research from 2030, when you just said, Lisa, that we don't have data from the future. They posited data from the future. That research note about what the future with AI would look like, and then kind of the counterpoint with Citadel, which I think is just an interesting example of these different narratives.
Well, and just people stepping back and saying Citrini moved the market massively with a speculative fiction. And that can be both horrifying and then also maybe in a way a little bit empowering if you wake up to the role that narrative plays in all of this. And, there's an opportunity there along with an imperative as well.
And I just want to build, one more thing on that, which is getting back. You thought you were going to be able to ask questions? No. Which is just this idea
He showed up with takes.
of the intentionality of Summit to actually build new skills. And I think what Jeff is pointing to is actually three different skills that we could just unpack. One is awareness of a narrative, when a narrative is in play. Are you taking that as fact or is this a story? The second is your own ability to come up with a clear narrative about a future or multiple futures. And then the third is how you communicate it. These are obviously all related, but they're distinct. And I'm not sure any of them have actually been taught anywhere. So what an opportunity for this group to dive into it.
I think it's also an opportunity to change the narrative that HR often has about itself. Like, how long have we heard HR needs a seat at the table? Well, here's your chance, dudes. Like, it is time to have a narrative and to sit at that table and change how we think about ourselves and how the organization thinks about HR as well. And this is a good opportunity to jump into that. We jumped right in, guys, but we'd really like to do a quick introduction of you all and the type of work that you do. So, Lisa, why don't you go first and tell us what you do?
Oh, fantastic. My day job, I teach at the Stanford d.school, where I lead their futures practice to help our students anticipate new futures, imagine new futures, and learn how to bring them to life in productive and diverse ways. I teach classes like View from the Future, which just wrapped up. I used to teach a class called Inventing the Future. And within my colleagues, I'm constantly practicing it by bringing outside voices in, all of the futures work, taking a longer view, looking from multiple perspectives, how the world is changing and why. And I am also more recently the host of a new podcast that is trying to help more people learn how to shape better futures called How We Future. And in the podcast, we have conversations with fantastic folks like Jeffrey Rogers, who is an expert on futures facilitation, to help more people learn skills to bring about hopeful futures. So all of our stories are accessible, they're pragmatic, and they're bright spots of people that are actually shaping better futures.
I'm not sure I've ever asked you this question, Lisa, but I'm super curious about how you got into future thinking. Like, how did you get here?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and maybe this is relevant. Where's my couch? I'm going to lie down. I stumbled into it, Danny, honestly, right after the .com bust. And I moved to the Bay Area from the East Coast. You meet me for 3 seconds, you know I'm an East Coaster diaspora. And I came out here late 99 because I've always had a real hunger for innovation and growth and entrepreneurial spirit. I fell into design strategy as a practice, and I came out here to help build one of the first UX consulting companies out here in 1999. And we were on a huge trajectory of growth. It was incredible until the market bombed. And overnight, our leadership team took this incredible organization that we were all felt so proud to be a part of, announced a 30% RIF, and proceeded to handle it in the most inhumane way I had ever seen in my whole life. And even though I was a survivor of that company, I was just so disillusioned by the leadership choices. I soon left and went on my own journey to really think about what is the design of leadership conversations? Like, how could a company that had such a great culture go sour so fast? And I spent a lot of time thinking about what excited me, what empowered me. And I returned to an old experience I had going to a systems thinking conference in 1996 with my mother. We were the only mother-daughter duo. You all have heard me talk about the fact that my mother's a chief learning officer. And I remember seeing graphic recording being done by Nancy Margolis. This is where you do live sketchnoting of conversations. I remember feeling totally alive by it as a design person. I was like, this is incredible. Anyway, I'll skip a bunch ahead. Long story short, I found myself taking a course in graphic facilitation, and there met Lynn Carruthers, who was the graphic recorder for a scenario planning firm called Global Business Network. That was 2002. And she said, I've never taken a resume in ever after working here for 15 years. And I ended up starting to work there. So it's really been over 20 years now thinking about scenario planning as a method of futures thinking. And then when I combine that with design, I just feel like these two practices, mindsets, skill sets gives any leader outsized leverage. And that's what gets me up every day. I've written a number of books, as you know, the classes I talked about. And this is a group, particularly people leaders, I feel very passionate and strong advocates of to help them learn these skills so they can have outside influence as well.
Jeff, what about you? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. I just wish that I had Lisa's CV. Man, and what an origin story too. If we can get some multi-generational attendee groups coming into the Red Thread event this year, that would be amazing. You never know where that mother-daughter combo is going to go in the years ahead. I am also something of an accidental futures and foresight practitioner. I was supposed to be a historian. That's actually how I got out to the West Coast initially, where I would many years later meet Lisa K. Solomon. I moved to UC Berkeley in 2004 and was supposed to be a historian. I was not a good grad student, not sure if I was ever going to be a good historian. I did a lot of kind of meandering around between disciplines, between literatures, kept coming back to the same kind of basins of attraction, reading Buckminster Fuller, Peter Drucker's Age of Discontinuity. I was pretty into at the time. I was very curious. I was doing a project on the dawn of the information age and what some of the contemporary perspectives were there, and really had no idea what I was doing. And only many years later, after I had eked out a master's degree, dropped out of a PhD program, wound up in experiential education, working in youth leadership, and bumped my way down to Silicon Valley and worked in ed tech for a while. Many years later, was I able to kind of put some of this together when I saw a job opening at a place called Singularity University and looked into it. And it turned out that it was founded by Ray Kurzweil. And I remembered reading some Ray Kurzweil when I was supposed to be doing other things when I was in graduate school and was kind of reading about the future instead of studying history like a proper academic in the archives would be doing. And I was quite curious. And it turned out they had an opening where they were trying to stand up some more online programs. And they were looking for someone to help them build a practice of teaching and learning in digital spaces. And that was actually what I was doing at the time. And I thought, well, maybe I could do this. I got on with Singularity, and it turned out they actually were not prepared to launch these digital programs, but they had other things going. They had some great executive education programs that were running in person. They had fantastic facilitators like Lisa K. Solomon, who was one of the first people that I met there. And it turned out there was actually more of an opportunity for me to move into that space within the organization. And so I actually started working as a facilitator there and found that, weirdly enough, my perspective as an almost historian and kind of getting into some systems thinking and questions about how we got to where we are and where we could have gone instead, those actually were great questions to bring to conversations about the futures that we are enabling or not. And had plenty of time to kind of brush up and learn some of the practices of foresight and a lot more about the emerging technology space, a little bit more about strategy and entrepreneurship there. And now fast forward another 10 years down the line. And this is what I've been doing for a decade. And I currently work part-time with a boutique learning and innovation consultancy called Radical out of Boulder, Colorado. I have my own company, which is actually focused on attendee engagement. We do large corporate events. We are very interested in maximizing the value of getting people together. Being in a particular place for a particular conversation with a particular group at a particular moment in time is something I'm very passionate about. And working with you all gives me kind of an opportunity to do all of these things where I can talk about futures, I can practice foresight, I can be in a room with a group of experts in their own domains who are eager to learn from each other and really try to stir that pot and see what kinds of answers we can come up with when we're asking new and different questions. And that's a lot of what I'm passionate about.
Well, we feel incredibly lucky to have you both again. Thank you for signing up again after the craziness that was our first conference last year.
Jeff, and we've talked about this before, I think even on the last podcast, but we're both historians, both lovers of, I would say, studying patterns and thinking about alternate realities, as it were. Sometimes I get asked this question, so I'm going to start with you with this question, which is, okay, well, that's cool, but like, you don't have a degree in HR. So why shouldn't HR leaders be listening to your perspective, our perspective, really, right now?
Yeah, fortunately, it's not because of my degree. I'm not sure that that's really how we should be credentialing people to enter into these conversational spaces. I think what I bring in some ways is the fact that I'm not that thing. I am an outside perspective, and I've spent, as I said, the last decade kind of moving between conversations, moving between groups of leaders in different industries and hearing a little bit about how they're thinking about the future. What are they excited about? What are they concerned about? What questions are they asking? What opportunities are they seeing? What opportunities do they wish they had seen and had overlooked, and why? What threats were they blindsided by? And getting back to this idea of patterns, a lot of the patterns in organizational behavior and organizational design are fairly similar and consistent from industry to industry, organization to organization. A lot of them are confronting the same challenges. And HR leaders have one perspective. We can maybe help them see a different one that can augment their own. And I think a whole lot of what is really of value when we talk about thinking more creatively and effectively about how to navigate the future is the idea of outside in thinking, actually getting out of your own head and your own perspective, your own experience, and recognizing that that may not be the best guide to inform your future expectations. The past is not necessarily the best guide. And so being able to get an outside perspective, I think, is really valuable. And that's what I try to bring in the work.
Great. Thank you. Lisa, how about for you?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jeff said. I think if you only had HR experts talking to other HR folks, it would be incredibly narrow in the conversation. One of the things that I learned early on in doing the futures work was that there were really 3 core principles. Jeff hit on one of them. The first is the ability to take a longer lens. So I imagine that folks in HR are very much focused on the next quarter, the next year, maybe 3 years if you're lucky. But the ability to really stretch out your time horizon feels like a luxury at times, but it's actually urgent, and it could be a very resilient thing to do. It can give you a longer perspective. As Jeff said, some of the organizational dynamics playing out now are new, and a lot of them are not new. They've been playing out. I mean, there's a reason why Peter Drucker, is enduring in some of his thoughts. At the end of the day, people are actually people, and there's a lot of patterns we can distill from that. That's actually grounding and useful. The other that Jeff said is this outside-in perspective. And that could mean a number of different things. One is we tend to think about 3 concentric circles. One is like what's happening in your org, what's happening in your industry, what's happening in the macro world. If you were only focused on what's happening in your org, which is a very natural thing to do. I certainly had a lot of classes like this in business school. What's your SWOT analysis? What is your 4 Ps if you're in marketing? What are your even KPIs? They start with your organization's performance. Then you can go into what's happening in the competitive world, who's doing what, and that's shifting more radically and rapidly than ever. And then what's happening in the outside world, which is last year we did scenario planning specifically to focus on that. Those are things like environmental forces, geopolitical, what's happening in technology. See, these are agnostic of what's happening in any org that you can go and talk to experts, or you can look at trends analysis, things that allow you to kind of visit the future to make sure that your strategy is more robust, that the things you are doing will be resilient regardless of how some of these things play out. And this last one that I think Summit is going to do, and certainly Elevate last year did beautifully, which is bring in multiple perspectives. That is also useful. If you only listen to experts that are close in, you're leaving yourself blindsided. So I think more than anything, and we haven't really said this word yet, but I think it's foundational to what I believe the value of futures thinking is right now. You have to learn faster. You have to learn wider. You have to learn across multiple time perspectives. The fastest learners will be the most ready to shape the future, to bring the future to life. I actually wrote an article, and maybe we can attach it to the show notes, 5 or 6 years ago that I think was one of the best ones I've written from a standpoint. It talked about the full stack learning organization, right? Like we think about full stack from a development, but when learning is sequestered to the compliance or to the kind of like checklist, things like that, you are missing an opportunity to empower everybody to learn faster. And even just thinking one more thought about AI and how AI is going to shift work, you have to lean into how AI is going to shift work. I mean, the more productive narratives, we're talking about narratives, are, AI and people are going to partner. Okay, what does that mean? It means a learning mentality of how to do that. It means bringing in experts. It means trial and error. It means leaning in. So that's going to require a vision from the top, an endorsement, a set of incentives, a strategy behind it. But it is possible to do. So anyway, that's what I think is really important about having those elements that are designed in. And I'm really grateful that Jeff and I get to design this with you, that we're not just showing up to say, okay, be entertaining host at the front of the room and allow us to do our stuff. From the beginning, let's really design every beat of this gathering to have those elements in mind.
So maybe let's contrast last year with this year. So it feels like we're 1 year later. It feels like every leader that I talk to, at least, is under more pressure than they were last year. I was reading an article this morning by our good friend Clint Coford, who talked about this idea of foresight being a really necessary leadership characteristic. And it reminded me that last year you all both talked about that as well, that it's a muscle that leaders in most organizations aren't using. And I would love your take. We're 12 months later. Is it as important? Is it less important? Talk about foresight.
I was going to say, it's definitely not less important. I mean, and again, I think one of the things we called out last year, and building off Stacia and Jeff, it's not every day I'm in a podcast with 50% historians. Awesome.
I'm sorry
just even
about
naming
that.
the fact
you should try working with them all the time.
Are you kidding? Well, I always call Jeff. He's always my first call. And it is worth noting that some of the best futurists are historians by training for all the reasons that you talked about. But it's always interesting when you just kind of name how undertrained and underprepared and underexperienced we are in thinking about the future when it's one of our most natural human innate skills that we are born with. When I work with, I think we even said this last year, but I almost every time I get in front of executives, I say, okay, how many people here have taken a class in history? Everybody. It's mandatory. We have history departments. We have masters in histories. We have PhD, multiple histories. Incredible. Okay, how many people have taken a class in futures? Zero, maybe one. Okay, which one of those can we influence? And I think Jeff said something earlier that was so brilliant, this idea that there's data from the past, but we're making decisions about the future. So we can just say it is not your fault if you don't understand foresight. That doesn't mean that you therefore don't need to lean into it and learn it. And I think it is absolutely critical that everybody walk away really thinking about how am I going to bring some form of strategic foresight into my work? And whatever way that means, don't get hung up on the definitions. Just bring in some practices. And I think both Jeff and I are really aligned about trying to make these practices more accessible to more people, whether it's doing headlines from the future, scenarios from the future, identifying assumptions about what you think might happen or not, bringing in stories that you think are wacky but might ultimately make a meaningful impact. Last year, we spent some time exploring the futures implication wheel. And Jeff, as part of his writing, has a great column that he does with our colleague Pascal Finette called Thin Whispers of Tomorrow. I love that phrase, right? Like the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, said William Gibson famously. And it's interesting because I'll just say one more thing. I mentioned earlier, I just wrapped up teaching View from the Future, where every week we bring in someone, a practitioner, a pioneer who's on the edge of their field to help our students understand where those fields are going, not only to better get a sense of these industries, and it's certainly not to predict the future, but it's helping them think about jobs of the future versus anchoring on the past. And every time we opened up the class, we would ground it in a futures principle. There are many of them. And I think our hope is coming out of Summit, people are going to be even more committed to figuring out how they bring this work into their work.
So, Jeff, maybe a follow-up question to that. Do you think HR leaders or any leaders are getting better at this, or do you think it's getting worse?
I think the ones who are working on it are getting better. Lisa talked about foresight principles and practices. The thing about practices is that you actually have to practice them, right? And when we ask, are these things becoming more useful, more valuable, more essential, or less? I think the answer is definitely more, because the world is becoming more uncertain and complex. And I don't think that there's any leader that you could bring into a conversation who's going to dispute that now. And, last year, I think at Elevate, we brought up a slide at one point with the World Uncertainty Index on it. And, you see a couple things there. One, it recently in 2025 and now early 2026, it has reached a peak that is so much higher than the global historical peak in 2020 that it's a weird thing to look back and see, wow, now leaders are looking back at high COVID days and saying, you know what, kind of felt like I had a sense of how things worked then. That was a comparatively certain time relative to where we are now. And, if you look at the trend line over 35 years of that data, it's steadily going upward. And that's the same 35 years where you have the rise of predictive analytics and big data and increasingly powerful and sophisticated AI systems, none of which are driving uncertainty out of the landscape that leaders have to navigate. So the opportunity then is to ask, well, what are the tools that can help me get better at this? And foresight offers an approach to navigating uncertainty more effectively and being better at working in a world where you can no longer expect to get like the 5-year strategy right. And instead, you hope to get the direction right and know that you're going to need to kind of learn your way along the path as you walk it. There's no map to a place we've never been. So we have to think about the tools that help us navigate without maps.
So I want to talk just for a moment about this moment that we're in and how it's different from the past, and then maybe what that tells us about the future? I think our original question was looking more at the past to now, but given what we've been saying, I think we need to also think about where does this project us towards the future? Last year, I remember there was a very clear moment, Jeff, when you asked people how they felt, and one person said, I think optimistic or positive, and you joked back, "Hey, have you been reading the headlines?" Which I thought was, it still sticks in my brain as one of the highlights and pivotal moments of the event. But as we think right now, what are you seeing about the mood with leaders, and has that changed from a year ago? And as we think about where we are right now, what might that tell us about what's coming? And I'm going to go to you, Jeff, first, just because you were the one who had that comment in the moment a year ago.
Yeah. That's a thing that I like to do at the opening of a lot of workshops and programs where I ask people to fill in the blank. The future is blank. So right now, I think not only what the future is, but the present is increasingly pressurized for leaders. And I think that they are feeling more performance pressure in their organizations. There is more pressure to demonstrate that they are proactive on adopting AI tools and systems that a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals still don't understand and haven't figured out how best to deploy. And yet we're moving to the point where we're being asked to show ROI. It's not enough to say that you're experimenting. You need to show ROI. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to simultaneously reduce headcount. Like if we can't show that the AI is necessarily working, at least maybe there's a little bit of an efficiency that we can point to if we're keeping revenues and profits up while reducing headcount. And then that leads to a pressure to maybe AI wash some things that organizations are doing and saying, hey, look what we're able to do now that we have these new tools. And all of that is creating, I think, a really intense environment for organizational leaders to navigate, and particularly for people leaders to have to figure out how to navigate and how to message, how to communicate through. How do you lead through that? That is incredibly complex. And I actually think that it's harder than it was a year ago. I think the pressure is mounting.
Yeah, I think that is super well said. One of the things I'm seeing is an even more accelerated digital divide, AI divide, those that are leaning in and willing to experiment and try, and those that are just like, I don't even know, like, what's this, what I hear recently, what's this cloud thing? Like they didn't even understand Claude, like what is this? And in fact, I just heard a story that I think is telling, because we're seeing a lot of headlines that are like entry-level jobs are harder than ever, that they're going away. I think that is the exact opposite. Personally, focus group of one of what should be happening right now, because a lot of these entry-level jobs, they are actually not just digital natives, but they're almost AI natives. They're the ones that are comfortable experimenting and vibe coding and doing cool stuff. I just had a conversation with my nephew, as an example, who has been working at a real estate company. He is a senior in college. He is a business major, never thought of himself as a technical person, really, not a coder, but he leaned on in. He's been doing an internship at a real estate company, and he said, hey, I'm going to run a workshop for my team about what AI is and how it differs, how is Siri different from LLMs and other, and he developed it, and the CEO found out about it, and next thing I know, all the SVPs are mandatory to attend, and next thing you know, he's now running a workshop about the risks and the opportunities. He's still a student, right? And he is the one holding the learning session, shaping the narrative with the knowledge, because he's willing to learn faster, and he is loving it, and he's having a great time, and he's feeling so excited about the possibilities ahead. That's a person that would say the future is optimistic in many ways, because he sees and he's creating that value. But if you're just looking at a spreadsheet, to Jeff's point, and you're looking how to get at least short-term returns or profitability to meet expectations because you didn't do maybe the work about what do we stand for? What is going to create lasting value? How are we going to create durable skills and programs to do that? Then you're going to be always in a reactive mode. So this is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to really challenge assumptions to the core. I feel like I need to speed up. Maybe I actually need to slow down and really think about your values and what your company stands for and the kind of talent that you need. I feel like I need to meet these expectations. Maybe I need to rethink how I'm talking about return and value creation. So I think we're at a moment where the conversations I hope happen at Summit are these kinds of conversations where, at the very least, equipping people leaders to have that conversation with the C-suite. And even Danny, to your earlier point about HR needs a seat at the table, let's just change the table. Like, why do we need to take, like how deep can we go to challenge the assumptions about how the future is going to unfold and what people leaders can do to really get ahead of it?
So, Lisa, that made me think of two things. One is the long shadow of a grandmother, in this case, CLO. It seems like it's just in the blood, apparently, in your family to enable learning. So that's amazing. But the second thing is what struck me that I don't think I've ever thought about, and this is why I love these conversations with you two, is how the underlying assumption in cutting kind of those entry-level jobs or bringing those folks into the organization is that the knowledge that exists in the more senior leaders is the thing we need to preserve. Whereas what's interesting is anybody who's worked with the LLMs and the like would know that at least an average level of knowledge is capable from many of these tools. So it's like almost a question of like, is the knowledge the thing that we should be prioritizing and therefore focusing on, we're going to cut the bottom and keep the top, as it were? Or is it that we should be prioritizing the way of learning or the way of thinking or the way of redesigning process around new technologies and capabilities? So really, you mentioned, we should be prioritizing like the values and such, but I wonder if it's like we need to rethink what are the things that drive value in the organization and what should we prioritize as a result? And maybe it's not this assumption of knowledge and judgment. And I say that fully knowing that at this point in my life, I'm in that group.
And that might work well for managing the known in a world that doesn't change much, kind of doubling down on the strengths that you have. We're going to hold on to the knowledge that we have. We're going to maximize it. We're going to give those people maybe some more tools to leverage so that they can do more. But when the world around you changes and they need to not only do more, but they need to do different, and you have not been bringing the future into the organization. You're not bringing in younger people. You're not bringing in juniors that you can then grow, that also have fresh blood, that are not just using their Claude or ChatGPT, but have been out there with OpenClaw and are actually experimenting more with agents at home and really understand how to set up experiments with this stuff. Like, you're probably missing a chance to bring that future closer, to take some of those changes that you see percolating in the macro that Lisa talked about and bring them into the organization so that it can reinvent itself and redesign and rewire itself. And ultimately, I think the thing is that you need both. You need both. This is one of the tensions, right? And this is a theme that I really hope we'll get into at Summit, is that there's not a one right answer. This is the way, this is the truth. Instead, we're probably going to have to be able to move between different approaches and different values and honoring, kind of things that can feel like they're in opposition, but that ultimately we need to have both of these be part of the picture and part of the story that we're telling about the future that we're building in the organization.
Can I just build on that? Sorry, real quick. Jeff said something again. I love working with Jeff. I love working with all you guys, but Jeff, as many one-liners, brilliant. Yeah, say more words, around getting the direction right versus the actual strategy, precise.
That's a Pascal phonetism, I should add.
Okay. All right. We love attributing. So, okay, I'm glad. I don't envision a world where technology doesn't continue to be a huge part of how we live and operate in the world, organizationally, in our daily lives. And I think there's an opportunity for every leader, both here and everywhere, to say, what is my relationship with technology? And maybe we can use generative AI as a start. How much percentage time am I spending experimenting, as Jeff said? And if I'm not, why not? And to really interrogate that, do I not understand it? And therefore it feels like, too overwhelming. Do I not have time? Have I not allocated actual time in my calendar to actually experiment with it? Do I not believe in it? Do I think it's like a fad and it's going to go away and I'm waiting for the AI graveyard to take hold? Or do I fear it? Is this like, wow, it's overwhelming? And even discerning between those postures towards AI is useful. because it gives you then data to then go and do it. All right, wow, well, if I don't have time for it, then how do I shift to make time? If I fear it, how do I find someone who can lower, the threshold to help me kind of, slowly get up to speed on it? And that is a set of learning experiences. Our time together, I don't think is going to be a learn how to use AI in your people leader skills, but I think the opportunity for people to learn from each other about how they're doing it, that is an accelerated way to try to understand a pathway forward.
All right. So last year at Summit, one of the things that we did is we introduced this idea of a futures wheel and understanding second level or second order consequences to certain things. I would love to just have a quick conversation with you both about maybe the second order consequences of AI on workforce design right now. Not necessarily the job displacement that's happening, but the thing that most organizations aren't even asking that they should probably be asking. Do either of you have thoughts on that? Jeff, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things that organizations are probably not thinking as thoroughly as they could be about in terms of the cascading implications of diving into and diffusing AI tools and systems in their organizations is actually what impact that's going to have on the things that people continue to invest in knowing and learning. And there's a little bit of conversation about kind of the de-skilling and some of the knowledge loss we can have when we automate a process, automate a system. I think that's something that is going to have perhaps a bigger impact than we realize, that you kind of wind up redesigning some of the organization unintentionally when you do that. And I feel like that's a place that maybe we could be thinking a little bit further in depth.
So I think this is interesting because Stacia and I have been exploring this thing called the hollowed out leader, which is basically you don't have the skills to back up what AI can help you do now as a leader or as a subject matter expert. And it sounds like that kind of drifts into what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are some capabilities that we might lose, some internal working knowledge that can be lost. I think further down the line, there's also a possibility that we lose some of the things that we think of as like real leadership and instead are building more just around management of agentic flows and processes and just making sure that, the trains are running on time rather than actually orienting the way that we're working around values that the organization might have once held. And I think that's going to have more knock-on effects for culture, what kinds of people you have, who gets elevated within the organization, and then ultimately what kind of shape the organization has further down the line. A lot of thorny issues to get into there.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this, both near term and longer term. I mean, one is, and I know this is something, Danny and Stacia, that you think a lot about, is something that we asked every single guest from my view from the future around what are the durable skills that people should be building regardless. And they do come down to things like, I love that Jeff talked about management, but how to communicate effectively across multiple mediums, how to develop a sense of taste, right? If everyone is a creator and can do all the things, how do you know what good looks like? How do you build a portfolio? How do you become discerning? How do you develop judgment? How do you critique? How do you make something better? How do you be a good teammate? How to actually help the team perform if everyone is individual or able to be a solo contributor? Interpersonal skills, like some of the basic stuff, I don't think that we should overlook or not take as seriously. And then that rolls up to what are the new roles that we need to be thinking about? I think every organization should have a cross-pollinator. I think it is someone's full-time job to walk around and be like, what's happening? What are you doing? Did you know that this connects to this? Do you know this connects to that? Like Slack is not good enough, right? Like you need someone bringing the human element around it. That's just one example. I think we're going to see a whole lot of new jobs, new roles. Like I think about the fact that, now marketing is called growth, for example, in many like how are things going to shift either incrementally or more significantly? But you also asked about second and even third order consequences. I am incredibly nervous and worried about our next gen folks. There are some that are thriving and doing great and a lot that are not. And eventually what we know about our next gen or even younger than that, they don't stay that. They grow up Where are they learning leadership skills? What models are they looking at? What are the experiences that they're having during this core developmental time that is helping them become critical thinkers, creative problem solvers, able to be strong citizens in the world? We're having some significant transition of many of our institutions. Trust is at an all-time low across nearly every indicator. Those are not great conditions for young people to feel like that they can be agentic, contributing, good citizens in the world. And so I worry about that. I worry about that a lot. That's a larger question. Everyone in school right now, if they're under 18, they're not going to stay under 18. And ideally, we will be a thriving society if they feel like they can be strong contributors to their communities, to organizations, to the future that they want to build. I'd be curious, like, are organizations adopting schools? Are they paying attention to that? Are they, figuring out what young people missed during this quote unquote transition that they're doubling down on? So these are all challenges, but also opportunities.
So we're starting to get tight on time. So I do want to ask you all one question about this year's summit vis-a-vis Elevate. And as you all have been thinking about our design together of summit, how do you see this as being evolved from last year? Lisa, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, great. Well, last year was the inaugural. Inaugurals are fun. You don't know what to expect. As I've said to you privately many times, which I'll say here, I think one of the core successes was the fact that folks came there because they knew you, they trusted you, you had one-on-one conversations that already made it different. From the beginning, you said, no talking heads on stage, we want to be interactive, we want to honor that there's incredible expertise in the room. I think that will hold, and that is a good thing. That's what makes it special. That's what creates the safe conditions for people to share what's going well and what's not going well. Expedited learning, where you don't have like a CYA mentality or not worried about. That is valued in of itself. So even if we came and we just were together with some lightly facilitated questions, I think it would be a win for everybody that went. Of course, that's not what we're doing. Last year, we also introduced some core concepts around futures thinking. We said earlier, we did the futures implication wheel. That's a practice among many to help people go from known to unknown, to remind themselves, oh, I am imaginative. Oh, I can think about the unknown unknowns. And then we did some scenarios and where we got into what could the future of work look like, and specifically for people leaders. There's always a balance when you're doing futures work to honor the stretch relevance continuum. I think we did that well last year. I think we'll also do that well this year. We want people to go away with some skills that they want to develop that will make them better at their jobs, that are also future oriented and also help them become more resilient amid all this change. So I think that we will be leaning into, again, what's relevant to them right now, what helps them stretch beyond where they are so that they can go back with their own personal learning agenda, with their organizational learning agenda, where you, Red Thread, can be a partner to them on that journey. But we're going to lead into some more concepts around that. They will be different than last year, but they will be among that same continuum of helping leaders learn things they never got exposed to, feel like that they're on a quick path to using them in valuable ways within their organization, and also feeling like there's a community around them that will help them.
Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I'm excited about coming back because we'll have a room with more connective tissue already established. Some of the people will know each other a little bit. And also, we'll have people in the room who already know some of that conceptual vocabulary, who were introduced perhaps to a futures lens or a foresight lens a year ago, and have had a year of being able to apply that to their thinking and their work and their way of leading in the world. And I love seeing on LinkedIn the number of people who are at Elevate who make some comment and tag me or tag Lisa about the way that they're thinking about a report with some scenarios they've just consumed, or trends that they talked about, or things that they got into in their futures wheel last year. I mean, you were asking me a minute ago about what are the second and third order implications that I see perhaps undervalued in organizations thinking about AI implementation. Well, everybody who was at the program last year walked away with that tool to apply to be thinking about the implications that they want to be paying attention to. And so when we get together this year, we'll have a room full of some more experienced practitioners, and we'll be able to build with them on the foundation that many have been kind of working with in the past year. And so we'll be able to deepen some practices. We'll be able to add some that are net new to the room. And then we'll also be able to complicate some things a little bit. We can take some of those scenarios that we kicked around last year and see how they've held up and dive a little bit deeper again into what are some of the tensions we see where it didn't turn out to be just this one or just this one. It's actually some of both. And that messy middle, it's neither utopian nor dystopian, but centopian. That's where the future usually plays out. And we can spend a lot of time unpacking what it is like to live in that space, between today and tomorrow, between these two tensions. And again, I'm excited to talk about the stories that shape our understanding of what our role is there and what's possible.
Lisa and Jeff, thank you so much for being with us. We're looking forward to June as well. We want to wrap this up with the same question that we ask everybody on our podcast. We'll start with you, Lisa. Why do you do the work that you do?
I get up every day thinking about how I can help more leaders and learners feel like they can shape better futures. And what makes me optimistic after 15 years of teaching this, over 20 years of working with leaders on this kind of work, I know it's doable. When I hear responses like I just heard with my students, I used to think the future was shaped by just a few, and now I feel like I have the tools and practices to shape the future. I mean, that is the best kind of viral motivation, inspiration to keep going. It's why I started the How We Future podcast, to put more stories out there to help more people feel like they can be active contributors to the world that we want to build. And I never get tired of that. And I never get tired of working with amazing people like Jeff, like you all, who are on that same journey.
How about you, Jeff?
Well, I mean, Lisa already said all the good stuff, so I'll take what's left to me. And I think this may be a bastardization of a Charles Kettering quote, but I'm excited to think about and explore and learn to better work with the future, because that's where I plan to spend most of my life.
I like it.
And I'm excited to join events like Summit, because people leaders touch a lot of people's lives. They're steering big organizations, and we spend a huge amount of our time at work and actually thinking about how we create a better future for work and for employees and for organizations. That's a big part of the lives that a lot of people are going to lead. So doing it better, doing it in a way that is also shaping a future that we'll be happy to wind up with and to inhabit. It's a huge project. What could be more exciting?
Lisa and Jeff, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. A ton of fun.
Thank you both.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Workplace Stories. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to know about future episodes. For exclusive access to our research, insights, and a vibrant network of human capital leaders, consider joining the Red Thread Research community. Visit redthreadresearch.com to learn more and to take your workplace to the next level.